Uh-oh. Sounds like somebody's got a case of the Mondays.
You are now listening to the Unscripted Ohio Podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Grove and in part by JFQ Lending. All your home purchase and refinance needs should be handled by a Buckeye. You'll never pay for your appraisal with these guys. Licensed in 33 states and more on the way. Check them out at jfqlending.com. For the latest news, notes, analysis, and discussion, check us out on BuckeyeGrove.com and follow us on Twitter at UnscriptedOhio1. Now, broadcasting from Podcast Central, a place that is not his mother's basement.
Hey, Ma! Can we get some meatloaf?
We promise. Here's your host, Kyle Lamb.
Hey, Ma! The meatloaf!
One down, 11 more to go. You're probably saying Ohio State 45-21 winners over Florida Atlantic. The Owls on Saturday. Lane Kiffin leaving with his tail tucked between his legs. Good Monday. I am your host of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast. I am Kyle Lamb. We are the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network, brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com, as well as our title sponsor, JFQ Lending. All of your mortgage and refinance needs should be handled by a Buckeye licensed in 33 states. Please go check them out for more information at jfqlending.com. We are also supported by GoBus, rides to over 40 stops across Ohio, connecting rural communities to Columbus, Cleveland, and Cincinnati. Get to Ohio State games this fall with GoBus. Bring the comfort back to traveling. Visit them at ridegobus.com or call them at 888-95-GO-BUS. So, I'm going to get right into it today. So, I'm going to analyze what we saw on Saturday. I'll analyze with my own opinions. Of course, some of you may respectfully disagree, but this is just going to be what I saw. We're going to try something new. If you followed the show last year, you know, when we were on our Monday and Wednesday format, you know that Ross and Kirk would usually podcast with me on the Monday shows to recap what we saw. We may still do that a little bit, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of handle the instant analysis on the Monday show. And on the Wednesday show, we're going to kind of bring in Ross and or Kirk, and we're going to go over a little bit of what we saw previously and then kind of look ahead as well. This Wednesday in particular, I'm also hoping that Pete Thamel of Yahoo Sports will be on with me to talk some college football. I'm working on getting that set up. And then this Friday, we'll look ahead a little more to the UC game, Ohio State-Cincinnati, noon on ABC this Saturday from Ohio Stadium. We'll preview the Bearcats on Friday. So that's going to be the format this week. And, of course, don't forget, we've got a full podcast lineup. I'm really, really excited. So in addition to my Monday, Wednesday, Friday shows here on Unscripted Ohio, of course, Corey and Johnny will still be at you with the Scarlet and Gray podcast on Tuesday and Thursday, but we're adding a little wrinkle because this week we've got the Dog Days podcast premiere, Chris Drew talking Cleveland Browns every Tuesday. That airs tomorrow. So your first crack at the Dog Days podcast coming tomorrow, Tuesday, and then Shane Larson will be back with the second installment of the Gridiron Game Time. So we've got a full lineup. The Scarlet and Gray podcast will run Tuesday and Thursday mornings first thing. So your morning commute, you can start off some Buckeyes listening with Corey and Johnny. And then in the afternoons, we'll have Dog Days and Gridiron Game Time respectively on Tuesday and Thursday. So really, really excited. But let's do a deep dive into what we saw on Sunday. Or I'm sorry, on Saturday. Look, first and foremost, let me get this out of the way. I know because of the insane start that Ohio State got out to, jumping out to a 4-touchdown lead before the first quarter was even over with, being up 28-0. At that point, you're thinking Ohio State is a juggernaut, right? I mean, you're watching this game and you're like, okay, the Buckeyes may be the best, greatest team ever to play college football. Okay, I know you weren't really thinking that, but still, it was just absolutely, awe-inspiring the way Ohio State started that game. And, there was, some question as to, okay, well, how good is Florida Atlantic really? But I even said this on Twitter. I was I knew that Florida Atlantic was better than what they were showing in that first quarter. I mean, I'm not saying that they, are going to win Conference USA or that they're the best, non-Power 5 team out there. But they were better than what that first quarter indicated, and what Ohio State did was really impressive because, that team has some talent. They've got a quarterback and running back, respectively, that came from Alabama and Oklahoma. So they've got some talent offensively. They've got some talent on the defensive line. There was no excuse for how bad they started that game. But Ohio State still, they got out to a crazy start. Everybody's like, whoa, what do we have here? The Buckeyes are looking amazing. And then it got into the second quarter and everything just changed. There are some reasons that I'm going to go over that I think people need to take with a grain of salt. So, yes, Ohio State's probably not as good as that first quarter indicated, but they're also not as bad as that second quarter indicated. And when you look around college football, this is really important. Almost nobody looked impressive this weekend. Outside of Alabama, who actually got off to a slow start against Duke, outside of Alabama, maybe Clemson, and Oklahoma Sunday evening against Houston, there were only a handful of teams that actually looked good. Georgia struggled with Vanderbilt, but then you go down the line. Remember, Florida last weekend looked bad against Miami. So many SEC teams struggled. The SEC lost 4 games this weekend, struggled with many other games. Mississippi State barely beating Louisiana, Kentucky struggling with Toledo. Arkansas won by 7 points against FCS Portland State. So the SEC really took it on the chin this week, but it wasn't just the SEC. There were not a lot of teams that looked good. Even Nebraska. I mean, they had to have some defensive touchdowns to rescue Nebraska against South Alabama. It was not a good weekend if you were a heavy favorite against a non-Power 5 team or an FCS team, because so many teams struggled. So when you look at Ohio State, they were 27-point favorites coming into this game, and they won by 24. And at the end of the day, regardless of how that game started, you could look at it in a vacuum and say, well, they got up to a 28-point lead. Yeah, they did. But that was smoke and mirrors, okay? That was not realistic to expect to continue, and that was just too good a team to continue that way. And I think what happened, in my opinion, is a few things happened. I think Ohio State, let off the gas a little bit in terms of play calling. I think they got a little bit conservative. They began shuffling some guys in on the offensive line. I think that broke the continuity. They were playing into that second quarter. They were playing some second-team guys, okay? So they started experimenting with some other combinations on the line. So I think that broke their continuity. And, also Florida Atlantic adjusted. They started blitzing Ohio State like crazy, and that's something that Ohio State is going to have to work on. Justin Fields, and I'm going to talk about him more extensively here in a few minutes, for as great as he looked, I thought that was the one thing that he's going to have to do better. He did not recognize the blitz very well. There were some pre-snap reads where the safeties and corners were sneaking up, and he just did not see the blitz coming before it actually happened. So I think when you add those things in, I think that kind of explains away why the Ohio State offense went dormant for the second and third quarters. Now, keep in mind, it was just the second and third quarters. I know, people were acting like they didn't do anything for the rest of the game after that first quarter, but Ohio State put up 17 points in just under 15 minutes from the last 2 minutes of the third quarter into the last 2 or 3 minutes of the fourth quarter. They put up 17 points. That's on pace for 68 for an entire game. So it's not like they continued to just suck the rest of the game. I mean, they actually started taking control in the late third quarter and fourth quarter. It wasn't as explosive, not the big-time explosive plays, but they started wearing Florida Atlantic down up front. They started running the ball a little better, just dink and dunk passes, driving down the field. So they kind of got their ish together just a little bit there. Justin Fields, what can you say about him? He looked fantastic. The performance he gave on Saturday is exactly why Ohio State fans were being a little silly for worrying too much about the spring game performance. This is why spring games, if we didn't already learn our lesson from Dwayne Haskins last year, remember Haskins went 9 of 19 in the spring game and then wound up, throwing for nearly 5,000 yards, 50 touchdowns. So if we didn't learn the lesson last year, Justin Fields is another reminder this year why you should not take spring game performances too literally. Remember, Bam Childress was a spring game all-star. He would have been the best wide receiver ever at Ohio State if he carried over a spring game performance into the actual season, but that didn't happen. I'm not saying never take any performance in the spring game analytically. Like, you don't have to totally ignore it, but they really need to be taken with a large grain of salt. And we saw that on Saturday with Justin Fields. He showed, in my opinion, that he is the most overall talented quarterback ever to play at Ohio State. I really believe that. It's not to say he's going to be the best. I'm just saying he is the most all-around talented when you take into account arm strength, accuracy, ability to run. Put all that together, he has got the chance to be the best quarterback at Ohio State. As far as debuts go, I posted this little nugget on Twitter over the weekend. He put up one of the better debuts. If you look at all the starting quarterbacks at Ohio State, some of the more anticipated starts, his numbers were up there. He completed 18 of 25 passing, 234 yards, almost 10 yards per attempt. Of course, he had 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, and then had that 50-yard running touchdown as well, which, interestingly enough, of all of the guys that have started for Ohio State in their debuts, Braxton Miller, Terrell Pryor, Dwayne Haskins, to a lesser extent, although he's not a running quarterback. But you look at many of the other talented dual-threat quarterbacks that have started for Ohio State, of the list of the guys that you would think off the top of your head, the first 8 to 10 guys, it was actually only Justin Fields to actually run for a touchdown in his starting debut. So I thought that was interesting. But he put up a performance that was right up there with some of the best. Haskins as a redshirt sophomore last year, Cardell Jones as a redshirt sophomore against Wisconsin in the Big Ten Championship back in 2014. You think of Joe Germain as a senior back in 1998. Of course, he played a lot as a junior, but it wasn't until his senior season where he actually became the starting quarterback. And then, of course, Terrell Pryor, Braxton Miller, Todd Beckman, some of the other guys that have stepped in and played. I mean, there have been some decent starts, but Fields was definitely up there. I mentioned the blitz recognition. I thought that was his only weak spot. And, one of the things that I've seen on Twitter, people have been analytical, critical about is his, zone read recognition. Let me make this very clear. It is not my belief that they were actually running the zone read after the first quarter. If you go back the previous 2 weeks, Ryan Day has been very adamant and very consistent that they were going to go above and beyond to protect Fields and try to minimize the risk of injury. When you're Ohio State and you're up 28-0 in the first quarter against a team like Florida Atlantic, a team that you're favored by 4 touchdowns, and your concern is the drop-off from your star quarterback to your backup, there's really no reason for you to continue putting your star quarterback in harm's way. And I don't believe for a second that those plays you saw in the second and third quarter were zone reads. They do have a play in their playbook, the option to make it look like a zone read where the quarterback continues to carry out the fake, and they'll still freeze the defensive end or whoever they're reading, but from the actual play call, he doesn't have the ability to keep it as it were a zone read. And I think after they got up by 4 touchdowns, maybe on that first drive, I think there was one case where there was a zone read and he blew the read because, if you remember the TV angle, showed him close up. He kind of had like this, oh gosh, what did I just do kind of look on his face. And it's almost like he knew he blew the read on that one. But after that particular play, my sincere hunch is that they didn't call another zone read the rest of the game. There were many times that people commented, well, that was a bad read. He should have kept it. But I really believe at that point they said, we are up 4 scores here. there's just no reason for Justin Fields to continue to run the ball. So we're not going to give him the option to keep it on the read, because you're trying to mitigate risk, and having him run the zone read up 4 or 5 touchdowns, to me, just seems like unnecessary risk, unnecessary hassle. So I don't believe that they were running the zone read. Now, I will say this. I think 2 things happened. I think taking away the zone read in the second quarter, 3 things really. Taking away the zone read, the Florida Atlantic defense really starting to blitz. They started creeping safeties and corners up to the line and really coming after Fields, and really run blitzing as well. In run situations, I think that they knew Ohio State was going to continue to run J.K. Dobbins, and they were just making sure they got pressure, whether it was a run or a pass. I think that was the second thing. And then the third thing, Ohio State really started experimenting with various rotations on the offensive line. So I think those 3 things, the run game really kind of struggled there in the second and third quarters with, some second teamers in on the line, and the combination of the Florida Atlantic defense and then the zone read not being put into play. Those things, I think, were factors in why Ohio State began to struggle. So, again, I think you have to take this performance with a grain of salt. I know there's some disappointment because of the way the offense just got out of the gate, just fireworks, huge explosions, these big offensive plays. Everything was coming so easily, and then it just stopped. But I think there are reasons for that, and it's Mark Gibler on the Buckeye Lounge, on the Horseshoe Lounge on BuckeyeGrove.com. He said it best. This was a perfect result for Ohio State, because you don't get a lot out of 7-0. You don't get a lot out of 70-0. But I think that in between, where you can see the talent and you can see things that you can build off with the personnel, you've got a reason to excitement. You've got reason to bring some confidence to your personnel. But you've also got plenty that you can show on film. It's like, look, we were winning when we were doing this, but here's what happened, and we can correct that. And I think Ohio State is in a great position. And Fields looks to me like he's not a finished product by any means. He's still, like I said, the recognition, the blitz recognition especially, I thought can be improved upon. But his throwing the ball, outside of maybe the one underthrow to KJ Hill in the first quarter where Hill came back a little bit and it hit him in the chest. He still should have caught it. But outside of that being underthrown, when Fields was able to step into his throws on Saturday, I did not think he missed on a single throw. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember seeing him be off on a single miss when he was able to step in and not be pressured, not pushed out of pocket, not having to throw off balance or off his back foot. When he was able to step into throws, I thought he was nearly flawless. And you just look at him, and you got to be in awe of his talent, because he's got a good arm, not as good as Haskins, but close. He can throw the ball with zip. He's got accuracy. His mechanics are decent. I really like everything about him as a passer, and of course he's got amazing straight ahead speed. I know people have compared him to Braxton Miller. He may have the straight ahead speed of Braxton Miller, but he doesn't have the elusiveness and the quickness. So that's where the one thing as a runner where he does not have that. He's not the shifty type of runner that's going to, like the Michael Vick type in the backfield. He's not like that. But when he turns the corner and goes forward, he's got amazing talent. So the offensive line, you can mitigate the second and third quarters because of the rotation. Fields, I thought, was pretty good all game long for the most part. J.K. Dobbins, he looked really good. I thought, as far as his speed, his quickness, his finishing runs, he looked good in all the physical attributes. Now, there have been a couple people, and I'm going to ask Ross this when I get a chance to speak to him more, but there have been a couple, pretty aware football minds that have said, they thought Dobbins missed a couple of holes and could have been better as far as that goes, as far as the psychological aspect of his game. But I thought physically he looked a lot better. He looked quicker, he looked stronger, and he was breaking some of the tackles. He looked a little bit more in the physical attribute areas that we saw as a freshman. But he obviously didn't break off the big runs, so it does beg the question, is he missing holes, or was the line just not getting him into the second level? But that's something we'll continue to look at. The receivers, they check the box. Ohio State looks really deep at that position. Ben Victor looked good. KJ Hill had a drop, but you know what you're going to get from KJ Hill this year. Austin Mack had a couple big catches. We didn't see a lot of Garrett Wilson. They threw at him a couple times. He was not able to make a play. But we know what Garrett Wilson is going to do before the season is over. Jeremy Ruckert at tight end, he deserves calling out. Looked really good, had a couple touchdown receptions. It's good to see Jeremy Ruckert play. But I thought, to me, the story of the game was on the defensive side of the ball. And for some odd reason, there was some hand-wringing, some huffing and puffing about the defense. And I'm really not sure why. If you really look at it, if you go back and look, the first team defense really only gave up about 11 points. And, honestly, the last touchdown, it was mostly second team defense. A couple of those scores that Florida Atlantic had were coming off of turnovers by Ohio State, where the defense, had to shut them down in their own territory or deep in the Ohio State territory. But for the most part, I thought the Ohio State defense was nearly flawless. I mean, when push came to shove, they still only gave up 230 yards for the entire game. They were good up front. They got pressure. I thought the angles that Ohio State took for tackling was the best we've seen in 3 or 4 years. Baron Browning had a great game, I thought. Malik Harrison, he really picked up where he left off in 2018. He made some vicious hits where, honestly, I thought guys were going to have to be taken to the morgue. They were hit so hard. But Harrison and Browning and Warner, I thought all of the linebackers were taking great angles and tackling well in space. There were only a couple missed tackles. I know that was something that Day, the past 2 weeks, had really called out as something that he was concerned about and wanted to see better. I thought for a first game of the season, I thought the tackling was sensational. Jeffrey Okudah looked like the shutdown corner that he's supposed to be. David Arnett, I thought, played a good game. Josh Proctor showed flashes. This Ohio State defense, and by the way, Chase Young, I didn't mention Chase Young. He is an absolute beast. He looks like a possible top 5 pick in the NFL draft right now. He is going to have a monster year. Had, 3.5 sacks, I believe. He was constantly in the backfield all day long. But look, it's one game. It's Florida Atlantic. I'm not ready to say the defense is the silver bullet defense that we saw in 2002 or the defense that we saw at the end of the year in 2014. There are some great defenses that Ohio State has had over the years. I don't know if this is one of those great defenses just yet, but it looked like a really fast defense that has corrected their issues with angles, that has corrected the issues with missed tackles. They seem to be playing really good in pass coverage. They're getting pressure up front, and I still don't know if the defensive line is going to be as good in the pressure department all the way across the board. We know Chase Young is going to be a monster and living in the backfield, but from end to end, I don't know if this defensive line for Ohio State is going to be as good as we've seen it in getting to the quarterback in the past. Okay, I'm not sure that they're there yet, but this is a fast defense with all those attributes I mentioned, and I think that they will get pressure. But really, the angles, I can't emphasize this enough. I thought the defense on Saturday took the best angles I really have seen the defense take in 4 years. They were reading the plays really well and coming across from their positions to get to the ball carrier with not taking any extra steps, not undercutting or overcutting, or should I say underrunning or overrunning. I really thought they were getting to the ball carriers unbelievably well. I can't emphasize this enough. Again, the first team offense really only gave up 11 points. I thought that they were just terrific on Saturday, and I don't understand or agree with some of the criticism. I really don't. I think if you're going to criticize anything on Ohio State, it's the offensive line performances in the second and third quarter. And again, I really believe that's mitigated by the fact that they made some rotation changes and personnel changes throughout the game. But at the end of the day, look, Ohio State won by 24 points in a game where they were favored by 27 points. And when you look at all of the teams across the country that were not able to dispose of the teams that they were supposed to, or at least by nearly as much as they were supposed to, I think you've got to be really, I don't want to say happy, but you've got to be content with this first outing for Ohio State. Now, make no mistake about it, the competition gets a lot better in a hurry. Cincinnati is coming to town at noon on Saturday, and this is a Cincinnati team that went out, beat UCLA again. I'm not sure that that's a big deal, but it is still a Power 5 team. They beat UCLA for a second season. This is a team that should win 9, 10, maybe even 11 games this year. This Cincinnati team that's coming to Ohio State on Saturday is going to be a tough test. It's going to be even better than Florida Atlantic. Ohio State will need to be more consistent up front offensively, and they're going to have to bring that same defensive intensity and performance that they had against Florida Atlantic. We'll talk more about that game, but Ohio State is 16.5-point favorites against Cincinnati, and I'm really interested to see. I think this is another good test for Ohio State. The next one after this is going to be going to Lincoln, Nebraska in a few weeks. That's going to be a really, really big one for Ohio State. But they can't sleep on this Cincinnati team, and I don't think that they will. So I give this performance a B. Okay, I think it could have been better. Like I said, the pass protection, as far as blitz recognition by Fields, that could be better. The offensive line looked good in spots, but they could have been a little bit better in those second and third quarters. If those things get corrected, and I think they will, I think this Ohio State team has enormous talent. 28-0, smoke and mirrors just a little bit, but some of that explosion that we saw was legit, okay? It wasn't all fantasy. There is some incredible talent on this Ohio State roster, and so I'm really looking forward to seeing how it develops over the rest of the season. Guys and gals, just simmer down just a little bit, okay? You can't win, if you look historically at the data, and if you're a 3.5 to 4 touchdown favorite, the number of times you actually win by 40, 50 points is really, really small, okay? That's a small percentage of the overall number of games. So to win by 24 points as a 27-point favorite, that really should be acceptable. I'm not saying it's a perfect performance. I'm not saying there's nothing to criticize. We've talked about some of them here on the show, and I'm sure there are other things you're free to mention and bring up that concerned you. Hit me up at KYLam8 on Twitter. I'd love to discuss them constructively with you, not like the sky is falling, because I think some of you are getting a little carried away with that. But there are things that Ohio State is going to need to improve on, and improve on very quickly before they get into the meat of the Big Ten schedule. But I like what I saw out of Ohio State. I think there are some things to correct, but the talent is definitely there. Justin Fields is legit. I think you'll see him in New York City as a Heisman finalist. I believe that it is shaping up to be a Tua, Trevor, Justin Fields, and Jalen Hurts, who looked really good against Houston last night. I believe it is looking to be those 4 finalists in New York City, a 4-quarterback, top 5 finalists pairing there. So we'll see what happens. But anyhow, that's going to do it for today. So like I said, tomorrow, Unscripted Ohio Network, we've got the Scarlet and Grape podcast coming up in the morning for your morning commute. And Chris Drew debuts the Dog Days podcast covering the Cleveland Browns. Very much excited about that. I'll be back on Wednesday and Friday. As I said, I'm working on getting Ross on midweek, as well as Pete Thamel of Yahoo Sports. I'm hoping to have him on. Haven't got that locked up just yet. And then I'll be back on Friday to preview Cincinnati. And then Thursday, in between the Wednesday and Friday shows, Johnny and Corey will be back again with Scarlet and Great. Pending the weather, by the way. Corey lives in Florida, and he very much may be impacted by Hurricane Dorian, which is just an absolute monster right now. So depending on the hurricane, Corey may be with Johnny, he may not. We'll see what happens there. But they'll be back. Scarlet and Great podcast will be back Thursday morning either way. And Shane Larson will be back to talk some college football. I know he's got a lot to go over after a busy first weekend of college football. So he'll be back Thursday afternoon with Gridiron Game Time. That's going to wrap it up for me. Again, you can catch me on Twitter at KYLAM8. We are here every Monday, Wednesday, Friday on BuckeyeGrove.com, and all of our podcasts, including Kevin Noon's Rapid Reaction after breaking news in every home football game. That'll be coming up. The home football games, obviously, he'll be here with the Rapid Reaction, but you can catch all those on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and Stitcher. Thanks for listening to Unscripted Ohio. Make sure you catch Johnny and Corey with Scarlet and Great and Chris Drew's debut of Dog Days on Tuesday. Have a great week, everybody.
You can get new episodes of Unscripted Ohio on Mondays and Fridays exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all things Ohio State.